Michael thought he had won. He had planned everything perfectly. The venue, the guest list, the seating arrangement. He wanted his ex-wife to sit in the front row and watch him marry someone new, someone better, someone who could actually give him what she never could. He wanted her to feel small, broken, ashamed. He wanted her to remember everything she had lost. But when that black Rolls Royce pulled up to the hotel entrance and the door slowly opened, when 4 identical boys in matching tuxedos stepped out onto the red carpet holding their mother's hands, when every single person in that ballroom turned to stare, Michael felt something he had never felt before. Not triumph, not satisfaction, but the cold, crushing weight of a truth he had spent 7 years running from. This is the story of Karen, the woman everyone called barren, and the wedding that changed everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 10 years ago, in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, Karen Mitchell was living what most people would call a dream life. She had married Michael Bradley 3 years earlier in a ceremony that cost more than most people's cars. The venue was a historic mansion overlooking the Willamette River. Her dress was custom designed, imported from New York, with lace sleeves and a cathedral train that seemed to go on forever. 200 guests attended. The champagne flowed freely. The photographs were stunning. Karen's mother cried happy tears. Michael's father gave a speech about legacy and family and the importance of carrying on the Bradley name. Everyone said they were the perfect couple. Michael was 32, a rising architect at one of Portland's most prestigious firms. He had dark hair that he kept perfectly styled, a strong jawline, and the kind of confidence that made people listen when he spoke. He drove a silver BMW, wore expensive watches, and had season tickets to the Trailblazers. Karen was 29, with soft brown hair, warm hazel eyes, and a gentle smile that put people at ease. She worked as a marketing coordinator at a nonprofit that supported foster children. She loved her job, loved the kids she helped, loved the feeling of making a difference. She had grown up in a modest household in Eugene, the daughter of a postal worker and a kindergarten teacher. Marrying Michael felt like stepping into a completely different world. For the first year, everything was wonderful. They bought a beautiful craftsman-style home in the Pearl District, with exposed brick walls and tall windows that let in streams of morning light. Karen decorated every room with care, choosing furniture from local antique shops, hanging artwork from Portland galleries, filling vases with fresh flowers from the farmer's market. Michael worked long hours, but when he came home, he would wrap his arms around her waist while she cooked dinner and tell her about his day. They hosted dinner parties where Karen would make her famous pot roast and Michael would pour wine and tell stories that made everyone laugh. They took weekend trips to the coast, walking along Cannon Beach hand in hand, collecting shells, watching the waves crash against Haystack Rock. They talked about their future, about the children they would have, about the life they were building together. Karen imagined a little boy with Michael's dark hair and her hazel eyes. She imagined birthday parties in their backyard, Christmas mornings with presents under the tree, family vacations to Disneyland. She imagined growing old with this man, watching their children grow up, becoming grandparents together. It felt real. It felt possible. It felt like everything she had ever wanted. But then the first year passed, and Karen wasn't pregnant. She didn't think much of it at first. They were young, healthy, not in any rush. But Michael's mother, Susan Bradley, a woman with sharp blue eyes and an even sharper tongue, started asking questions. During Sunday dinners at the Bradley family home, Susan would make comments that seemed casual but carried weight. She would mention friends whose daughters had just given birth. She would talk about how important it was to start a family while you were young. She would look at Karen with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and say things like, "Any news yet?" Or, "We're all waiting, dear." Karen would laugh it off, say they were just enjoying being newlyweds, but inside, a small seed of anxiety began to grow. Michael would reassure her on the drive home, telling her not to worry about his mother, that they had plenty of time. But Karen noticed he started checking his phone more during dinner. He started working later at the office. He started sleeping on his side of the bed instead of pulling her close. By the second year, the Sunday dinners became unbearable. Susan's comments grew sharper, less veiled. She would ask directly if Karen had seen a doctor. She would bring up statistics about fertility declining after 30. She would mention other women in the family who had gotten pregnant right away. Michael's younger sister, Jennifer, announced she was expecting her second child, and Susan threw a lavish baby shower at her country club. Karen attended, smiling through gritted teeth as Susan fawned over Jennifer's growing belly, making comments about how blessed some women were. Karen felt the eyes of every woman in that room on her, felt their pity, their judgment, their relief that they weren't her. She went home that night and cried in the bathroom while Michael watched a basketball game downstairs. When she finally came out, eyes red and puffy, Michael barely looked up from the screen. He just asked if she was okay. She said yes. He didn't press further. The third year brought doctor's appointments. Karen went to her gynecologist first, a kind woman in her 50s named Dr. Patterson, who had been her doctor since college. Dr. Patterson ran some basic tests, checked her hormone levels, did an ultrasound. Everything came back normal. "You're healthy," Dr. Patterson told her with an encouraging smile. "Sometimes it just takes time. Try not to stress about it." Karen wanted to believe her, but the pressure at home was mounting. Michael was growing distant, colder. He stopped touching her unless it was specifically for the purpose of trying to conceive. Their intimate life became mechanical, scheduled, devoid of any real connection. Karen would track her ovulation, tell Michael when the timing was right, and he would come to bed with the energy of someone completing a chore. Afterward, he would roll over and fall asleep without a word. Karen would lie there staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. She started to dread those nights, started to hate her own body for not cooperating, for not giving Michael what he wanted, for making her feel like a failure. By the fourth year, Michael insisted they see a fertility specialist. They went to a clinic in downtown Portland, a sleek modern building with marble floors and soft music playing in the waiting room. The doctor was a man in his 40s named Dr. Ramirez, who spoke in calm, measured tones. He explained the testing process, the various treatments available, the success rates for couples their age. Karen underwent more tests, blood work, ultrasounds, a procedure to check if her fallopian tubes were open. Everything came back normal. Dr. Ramirez suggested Michael get tested as well, just to rule out any issues on his end. Michael refused. He said it wasn't necessary. He said the problem was obviously with Karen, since all her tests kept coming back normal, but they still weren't pregnant. Karen didn't push back. She had learned by then that pushing Michael only made things worse, so she took the blame. She scheduled more appointments. She tried acupuncture, herbal supplements, meditation. She changed her diet, started exercising more, gave up caffeine and alcohol. She spent $40,000 of her own inheritance, money her grandmother had left her, on treatments that never worked. Every month she would take a pregnancy test, and every month it was negative. Every month a small piece of her hope died. The fifth year was when Michael stopped pretending to care. He started coming home later and later, sometimes smelling like perfume that wasn't Karen's. He stopped asking about her day. He stopped complaining when she cried. He just became indifferent, as if she were a piece of furniture he had grown tired of looking at. Karen threw herself into her work, staying late at the office, volunteering for extra projects, anything to avoid going home to that cold, empty house. Her coworkers noticed the change in her. Her best friend at work, a woman named Linda Chen, who ran the accounting department, would bring her coffee in the mornings and ask if she was okay. Karen would always say yes. Linda never believed her. One evening, near the end of the fifth year, Karen came home to find Michael sitting at the dining room table with a glass of whiskey in his hand. It was barely 6 o'clock. He looked up when she walked in, and the expression on his face was one she had never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, but something colder, something final. He told her to sit down. Karen's heart began to race. She set her purse on the counter and took a seat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Michael took a long drink from his glass, set it down, and said the words that would shatter her world. "I want a divorce." Karen felt the air leave her lungs. She stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, to say he was joking, to tell her it was some kind of test. But Michael just stared back, his jaw set, his eyes hard. "Why?" Karen managed to whisper. Michael leaned back in his chair and let out a bitter laugh. "Why?" Karen, we've been trying for 5 years. 5 years. Do you know what that feels like? Do you know what it's like to watch all my friends have kids while my wife can't even give me one? Karen's hands began to shake. We can keep trying. We can see another doctor. We can... Michael slammed his hand on the table, making her jump. I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of pretending this is going to work. You are the problem, Karen. Every test you've taken says you're fine, but you're not fine, because if you were fine, we'd have a child by now. Karen felt tears streaming down her face. Michael, please. We made vows. We said for better or worse. We said... He cut her off. I don't care what we said. I care about my future. I care about having a family. And I can't have that with you. He stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the street. Karen sat frozen in her chair, her mind racing, her heart breaking into pieces she wasn't sure she could ever put back together. Then Michael said something that made her blood run cold. I met someone else. Karen's head snapped up. What? Michael turned to face her, and for the first time in years, she saw something resembling emotion in his eyes. But it wasn't regret. It wasn't guilt. It was relief. Her name is Ashley. She works at the firm. We've been seeing each other for a few months. Karen couldn't breathe. A few months? Michael nodded. She's 3 months pregnant. The room spun. Karen gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. 3 months. He had been cheating on her for at least that long, probably longer. And now this other woman was carrying his child, the child Karen had spent 5 years desperately trying to give him. How could you? Karen choked out. How could you do this to me? Michael shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. Because she can give me what you can't. Karen wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. She wanted to hurt him the way he was hurting her. But all she could do was sit there and cry while Michael called his lawyer and scheduled an appointment to file for divorce. He told her she had until the end of the week to pack her things and leave. He offered her $20,000 to buy out her share of the house, a fraction of what it was worth. Karen was too devastated to fight. She just nodded, gathered what little dignity she had left, and walked upstairs to the bedroom they had once shared. She packed a suitcase in a daze, folding clothes she couldn't remember buying, staring at photographs of a life that no longer existed. By the time she was done, it was past midnight. Michael was asleep on the couch downstairs. Karen left without waking him. She drove to Linda's apartment on the other side of town, knocked on the door, and collapsed into her friend's arms the moment it opened. Linda didn't ask questions that night. She just held Karen while she cried, made her tea, and set up the guest bedroom with fresh sheets and extra blankets. Karen spent the next 3 days in that room, barely eating, barely sleeping, replaying every moment of her marriage in her mind and wondering where it had all gone wrong. Linda would check on her periodically, bringing food Karen didn't eat, sitting on the edge of the bed just to keep her company. On the 4th day, Linda sat down and said something that would change everything. You need to get tested again. Properly this time. Not at some fancy clinic Michael picked. Somewhere you choose. Somewhere you trust. Karen looked at her with hollow eyes. What's the point? The tests always come back the same. I'm fine, but I can't get pregnant. That's just the truth. Linda shook her head firmly. No. That's what Michael told you was the truth. But Karen, in all those years, did he ever get tested? Did he ever actually prove that the problem wasn't him? Karen opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She thought back to that appointment with Dr. Ramirez, the way the doctor had suggested Michael get tested, the way Michael had refused. She had never questioned it. She had just accepted his word that he was fine, that the problem had to be hers. But what if it wasn't? What if she had spent 5 years being blamed for something that was never her fault? 2 weeks later, Karen sat in an examination room at Providence Medical Center, waiting for Dr. Rebecca Walsh to come in with her test results. She had spent the past 14 days in a state of numb anticipation, going through the motions of her daily life while her mind spun with possibilities. Linda had insisted on coming with her to the appointment, and now she sat in the chair beside the examination table, holding Karen's hand. When Dr. Walsh finally walked in, she was smiling. Karen's heart sank. She had seen that smile before, that sympathetic, nothing we can do about it smile. But then Dr. Walsh sat down, opened her folder, and said the words that would change everything. Karen, You're completely healthy. Your reproductive system is functioning perfectly. Your ovaries are strong. Your hormone levels are excellent. Your uterine lining is ideal. There is absolutely no medical reason you should not be able to conceive." Karen stared at her. But I tried for 5 years. I spent thousands of dollars on treatments. I did everything the doctors told me to do." Dr. Walsh nodded slowly. "I understand. And I've reviewed all your previous test results. Everything came back normal then, too, which tells me something important." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Karen, if a couple tries for 5 years with no success, and the woman is confirmed to be healthy, the issue is almost certainly with the male partner." The room went completely silent. Karen felt like she had been struck by lightning. Linda squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. "Are you saying—" Karen couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Walsh finished it for her. "I'm saying that, based on everything I see here, the fertility issue was never yours. It was most likely your husband's." Karen's vision blurred with tears. 5 years. 5 years of being told she was the problem. 5 years of taking the blame, of enduring the judgmental looks from Michael's family, of hating her own body, of feeling like she was somehow less than a woman because she couldn't give her husband a child. And all along, it had been him. Michael had refused to get tested because on some level, he must have known. He must have suspected. And instead of facing that possibility, he had chosen to destroy her. Karen left the doctor's office that day feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that she wasn't broken. Rage at Michael for what he had done to her. And underneath it all, a deep, aching sadness for all the years she had lost, believing his lies. She went back to Linda's apartment and lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Linda sat on the floor beside the bed, her back against the mattress, and said quietly, "You know what this means, right? When Michael couldn't get Ashley pregnant, he panicked. He probably rushed her to the altar before anyone could start asking questions." Karen turned her head to look at Linda. "What are you talking about? Ashley is pregnant," he said. Linda shook her head. "No, Karen, think about it. If Michael is the one with fertility issues, how likely is it that Ashley got pregnant after just a few months? I'm not saying it's impossible, but..." She trailed off, letting Karen connect the dots. Karen sat up slowly, her mind racing. What if Ashley's baby wasn't Michael's? What if she had gotten pregnant by someone else and convinced Michael it was his? Or what if there was no baby at all, and Ashley had lied to get Michael to leave his wife? Karen would never know the truth. But one thing was certain: Michael had built his entire case against her on a foundation of lies. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. It was a cold, impersonal process that took place in a lawyer's office with beige walls and uncomfortable chairs. Michael didn't even look at her. He signed the papers, shook his lawyer's hand, and walked out without a word. Karen signed her name with shaking hands, took her copy of the agreement, and left. Linda was waiting outside in her car. They drove back to the apartment in silence. Karen stared out the window at the gray Portland sky and wondered what she was supposed to do now. She was 34 years old, divorced, living in her best friend's guest room and starting over from scratch. She had no idea how to move forward, but she knew she couldn't stay stuck in the past. Over the next few months, Karen slowly began to rebuild her life. She threw herself into her job at the nonprofit, taking on more responsibilities, working with the kids who needed her most. She started running every morning before work, pounding the pavement along the waterfront, trying to outrun the memories that haunted her. She went to therapy every Tuesday evening, sitting on a gray couch in a small office and talking to a therapist named Dr. Morgan about loss, identity, and learning to trust herself again. Linda became more than a friend during that time. She became Karen's lifeline. Linda owned a small bakery in Northeast Portland called Sweet Comfort, and she would bring Karen fresh pastries every morning, forcing her to eat even when she had no appetite. She would drag Karen out to movies, to bookstores, to long walks through Forest Park. She never let Karen isolate herself completely, never let her sink too deep into the darkness that was always waiting at the edges of her mind. One Saturday morning, about 6 months after the divorce, Karen was helping Linda at the bakery. It was a busy day, the line stretching out the door as customers ordered cinnamon rolls, croissants, and coffee. Karen was working the register, ringing up orders, making small talk with regulars. She had just handed a bag of pastries to an elderly woman when a man stepped up to the counter. He was tall, with sandy brown hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a smile that seemed to carry a hint of shyness. "I'll take 2 cinnamon rolls and a black coffee, please," he said, his voice warm and friendly. Karen rang him up, and as she handed him his change, he said, "You're here every Saturday now, aren't you? I've seen you the past few weeks." Karen nodded. "I help my friend Linda out when she needs extra hands." The man smiled wider. "Well, you're doing a great job, and these cinnamon rolls are the best in Portland, so thank you for keeping them coming." He grabbed his order and left, but not before giving her one last smile. Linda appeared beside Karen the moment he walked out the door. "Who was that?" Karen shrugged. "I don't know, just a customer." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Just a customer who comes here every single Saturday and always orders the same thing. His name is David Anderson. He's a middle school teacher at the school 2 blocks over." Karen glanced out the window, watching David walk down the street with his coffee and pastries. "How do you know so much about him?" Linda grinned. "Because he's been coming here for months, and he always asks about you. I think he's working up the courage to ask you out." Karen felt her cheeks flush. "That's ridiculous. I just got divorced. I'm not ready for that." Linda put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not saying you have to marry the guy. I'm just saying it's nice to be noticed. And Karen, you deserve to be noticed. You deserve to be happy." Karen didn't respond, but as the day went on, she found herself thinking about David, about his kind eyes, about the way he smiled, about the way he had made her feel, even for just a moment, like a normal person instead of a woman carrying the weight of a failed marriage. David came back the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that. Each time, he would make small talk with Karen, asking about her week, telling her funny stories about his students. He never pushed. He never made her uncomfortable. He was just there, present, kind, real. After a month of these Saturday morning conversations, David finally asked her out. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Karen was leaving the nonprofit after work when she saw him standing near her car. She recognized him immediately and felt her heart skip a beat. "David, what are you doing here?" He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I'm sorry for showing up like this. I know it's probably weird, but I didn't want to wait until Saturday, and I didn't have your number, so I just..." He trailed off, taking a deep breath. "Would you like to get coffee with me sometime? Like, an actual sit-down coffee where we're not at a bakery counter and there's not a line of people behind me?" Karen hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself from the possibility of getting hurt again. But another part of her, the part that had been slowly healing over the past few months, wanted to say yes, wanted to take a chance, wanted to believe that not every man was like Michael. "Okay," she said softly. "Coffee sounds nice." David's face lit up with relief. "Really? Great. When are you free?" They exchanged numbers right there in the parking lot, and 2 days later, Karen found herself sitting across from David in a cozy coffee shop in the Alberta Arts District. They talked for 3 hours. David told her about his job teaching 7th grade history, about how much he loved working with kids, about the time one of his students brought a pet snake to class and chaos ensued. Karen told him about her work at the nonprofit, about the foster kids she had grown to love, about how rewarding it was to see them succeed despite the odds stacked against them. David didn't ask about her past. He didn't pry into her personal life. He just listened, asked thoughtful questions, and made her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed in years. They started dating slowly. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates. Dinner dates turned into long walks through the city. David was patient, never pushing for more than Karen was ready to give. He seemed to understand, without her having to say it, that she was carrying wounds that were still healing. On their 5th date, they were sitting on a bench near the waterfront, watching the sun set over the river, when David said something that made Karen's heart stop. "I need to tell you something important." Karen turned to face him, her stomach tightening with anxiety. This was it. This was where he told her he was married, or moving away, or not interested anymore. But David just looked at her with those kind eyes and said, "I can't have biological children. I had testicular cancer when I was 23. The treatment saved my life, but it left me infertile." Karen stared at him, unable to speak. David continued, his voice steady but vulnerable. I wanted you to know before things got too serious between us. I understand if this changes how you feel. I understand if you need to walk away. But I couldn't keep going without telling you the truth." Karen felt tears welling up in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of something else. Something that felt like relief, like recognition, like the universe finally aligning in a way that made sense. She reached out and took David's hand. "It doesn't change anything," she whispered. Then she told him everything. About Michael. About the years of trying. About being called barren. About the divorce. About the doctor who finally told her the truth. David listened to every word. And when she was done, he pulled her close and held her while she cried. "You're not broken," he said softly into her hair. "You never were." They got married a year later. It was nothing like Karen's first wedding. There was no fancy venue, no expensive dress, no 200 guests. Just a small ceremony in Linda's backyard with their closest friends and family. Karen wore a simple white dress she found at a boutique in Hawthorne. David wore a gray suit. Linda officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Karen's mother cried happy tears, the same way she had at Karen's first wedding, but this time it felt different. This time it felt real. When David slipped the ring onto Karen's finger and promised to love her for the rest of his life, Karen believed him. Not because he was perfect, but because he saw her, truly saw her, and loved her anyway. 3 months into their marriage, Karen woke up feeling sick. She assumed it was the flu. She had been tired lately, nauseous in the mornings, unable to stomach certain foods. Linda noticed and brought over a bag of pregnancy tests, insisting Karen take one just to rule it out. Karen laughed it off. "Linda, David can't have kids. The doctors told him years ago. There's no point in taking a test." But Linda was insistent, and eventually Karen relented. She took all 3 tests, one after the other, just to satisfy her friend, and all 3 came back positive. Karen sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the 3 plastic sticks lined up on the counter, unable to process what she was seeing. It wasn't possible. David couldn't have biological children. The doctors had told him that. He had accepted it. They both had. But the tests didn't lie. She called David at work, her voice shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. He came home immediately, and together they went to Dr. Walsh's office demanding answers. Dr. Walsh ran every test imaginable: blood work, ultrasounds, hormone panels. And then she called them into her office with a smile that made Karen's heart race. "Karen, you're pregnant," Dr. Walsh confirmed. "And David, I know your medical history, so let me explain what's happening here. You were told you were infertile due to the cancer treatment, and that's partially true. Your sperm count is extremely low, about 2% of the average male. Most fertility specialists would classify that as functionally infertile. However, functionally infertile doesn't mean impossible. It means conception is highly unlikely, but not impossible. And in your case, nature found a way." David sat back in his chair, tears streaming down his face. Karen reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "So, we're really having a baby?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Walsh smiled. "Yes, and actually..." She turned the ultrasound screen toward them. "You're having more than one baby." Karen's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, at the 4 tiny shapes moving in perfect synchronization. "4?" David choked out. Dr. Walsh nodded. "Quadruplets. It's extremely rare, especially in natural conception. But congratulations. You're having 4 healthy babies." The room erupted. David stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. He grabbed Karen and held her tightly, laughing and crying at the same time. Karen couldn't stop staring at the screen, at the 4 little heartbeats flickering on the monitor. 4 babies, 4 miracles, 4 pieces of proof that she had never been broken, that her body had always been capable, that Michael had been wrong about everything. The pregnancy was difficult. Carrying quadruplets meant constant monitoring, frequent doctor visits, and complete bed rest by the 6th month. Karen's body stretched in ways she didn't think possible. She couldn't sleep comfortably. She couldn't walk without help. She felt like a beached whale most days. But David was there for every single moment. He rubbed her swollen feet. He made her favorite foods. He read to her every night before bed. And when Karen would cry from the physical pain and the overwhelming fear that something might go wrong, David would hold her hand and remind her that they had already beaten impossible odds. They would beat these too. Karen gave birth at 34 weeks, which was considered full term for quadruplets. The delivery was an event in itself. A team of 12 doctors and nurses, a fully equipped operating room, 4 warming beds lined up and ready. Karen was terrified, but when they placed the first baby in her arms, a tiny boy with a thick head of dark hair and the loudest cry she had ever heard, all the fear melted away. They named him Benjamin. Then came Christopher, who was 2 minutes younger and slightly smaller. Then Daniel, who came out screaming like he was angry at the world. And finally Ethan, the smallest of the 4, who arrived quietly, calmly, as if he had been waiting his turn. David stood beside Karen's bed, holding 2 of the babies while Karen held the other 2. And for the first time in years, Karen felt complete. Not because she had children, but because she had finally found the life she was meant to live. The life Michael had told her she would never have. The life she had been told was impossible. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. The first 2 years of the boys' lives were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the constant chaos of raising 4 children at once. Karen and David moved into a larger house in the suburbs with a big backyard and enough bedrooms for everyone. Linda practically moved in with them for the first 6 months, helping with feedings, laundry, and keeping the household running while Karen recovered from the delivery. Karen's mother flew in from Eugene every other week, bringing casseroles and offering to take night shifts so Karen and David could sleep. The boys were healthy, happy, and remarkably synchronized. They hit every milestone at the same time, rolling over at 4 months, crawling at 7 months, walking at 14 months. By the time they were 2 years old, they were 4 little tornadoes, tearing through the house with endless energy, laughing at everything, and developing their own distinct personalities. Benjamin was the leader, always the first to try something new. Christopher was the cautious one, watching before joining in. Daniel was the troublemaker, constantly testing boundaries. And Ethan was the quiet observer, taking everything in with serious eyes. Karen documented every moment. She took hundreds of photos, filled journals with stories about their first words and first steps. She wanted to remember everything because she knew how easily it could have never happened. She knew how close she had come to believing she would never be a mother, and now she was a mother 4 times over. David was an incredible father. He would come home from teaching and immediately drop to the floor to play with the boys. He would read them bedtime stories with different voices for each character. He would take them to the park on Saturday mornings, pushing all 4 of them on the swings, running after them when they scattered in different directions. Karen would watch from a bench, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was the life she had dreamed of during those dark years with Michael. This was what happiness felt like. It was around the time the boys turned 2 that the envelope arrived. It was a Thursday afternoon in late spring. Karen had just finished cleaning up after lunch, wiping juice stains off the kitchen table while the boys napped upstairs. She heard the mail truck pull up outside and went to check the mailbox. Mixed in with the usual bills and grocery store flyers was a large cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. Karen's name and address were written in elegant calligraphy. She opened it slowly, pulling out a thick cardstock invitation. Michael Bradley and Ashley Morrison request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. Karen stared at the invitation for a long time, reading the date, the venue, the Sentinel Hotel, one of the most expensive locations in Portland, and the dress code, which specified black tie. And there, at the bottom, written in by hand, was a note. Front row seating reserved for special guests. Karen felt her hands begin to shake. She walked inside and set the invitation on the kitchen counter. Linda, who had stopped by with fresh pastries from the bakery, saw Karen's expression and immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? Karen handed her the invitation without a word. Linda's eyes widened as she read it. Is he out of his mind? He wants you to come to his wedding? Karen sat down at the table, her mind racing. He's trying to humiliate me. He thinks I'm miserable and alone. He wants me to sit there and watch him marry Ashley to prove that he moved on and I didn't. Linda set the invitation down and crossed her arms. Then we don't go. We throw this in the trash where it belongs, and we forget about it. But Karen didn't respond. She was thinking, calculating. remembering the years of pain Michael had caused her, remembering the lies he had told, remembering the way he had blamed her for something that was never her fault. And suddenly, an idea began to form. A crazy, bold, possibly reckless idea. She looked up at Linda with a small smile. "What if we do go?" Linda frowned. "What?" Karen stood up, her voice growing stronger. "What if I show up to that wedding, not sad, not broken, not alone?" Linda's eyes widened with understanding. "With the boys?" Karen nodded. "I spent 7 years being told I was barren. Michael destroyed me because he thought I couldn't give him children. What if he sees that I did? What if he sees what his lies cost him?" Linda stared at her for a long moment, then slowly began to smile. "You're serious about this?" Karen picked up the invitation and looked at it again. "He wanted me in the front row. He wanted me to watch him celebrate his new life. So, I'll be there, and I'll bring my life with me." Linda let out a laugh. "This is either the best idea you've ever had or the worst." Karen smiled. "Guess we'll find out." The planning began that night. Karen wasn't going to just show up. She was going to make an entrance. She went through her closet and pulled out a dress she had been saving for a special occasion, a floor-length emerald green gown that Linda had made for her as a birthday gift. It was elegant, sophisticated, with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt. It made Karen feel like royalty. She called a friend who worked at a high-end car rental company and asked about availability. When she explained what she needed the car for, her friend laughed so hard she could barely speak. "You're really going to roll up to your ex-husband's wedding in a Rolls Royce with your quadruplets? Karen, I love you. I'll give you the car for free." Linda insisted on doing Karen's hair and makeup. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right. You're going to look like you stepped out of a magazine." They went shopping for outfits for the boys, matching tuxedos with tiny bow ties and shiny black shoes. Benjamin tried his on and immediately started strutting around the store like a little man. Christopher looked uncomfortable, but tolerated it. Daniel pulled at his collar and complained that it was too tight. Ethan stood perfectly still, staring at himself in the mirror with wide eyes. The saleswoman, helping them, laughed. "These boys are going to steal the show." As the wedding date approached, Karen felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of her was nervous. What if this backfired? What if people thought she was bitter or petty? But another part of her felt a sense of calm determination. She wasn't doing this to hurt Michael. She was doing this to reclaim her story, to stand up for the woman she used to be, the woman who was broken down and blamed for something that wasn't her fault. She was doing this for every woman who had ever been told she was less than because she couldn't have children. She was doing this to prove that sometimes justice doesn't come from revenge. It comes from simply living your best life. The morning of the wedding arrived. Karen woke up early, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. David helped her get the boys ready, dressing them in their little tuxedos, combing their hair, reminding them to behave. "Are you sure about this?" David asked as he adjusted Benjamin's bow tie. Karen looked at herself in the mirror, at the woman staring back at her, strong, confident, whole. "I'm sure." Linda arrived at 9 to do Karen's hair and makeup. She swept Karen's hair into an elegant updo with soft curls framing her face. She applied subtle makeup that made Karen's features glow without looking overdone. When she was finished, Linda stepped back and smiled. "You look stunning." Karen slipped into the emerald green dress, and David zipped it up for her. He kissed the back of her neck and whispered, "You're incredible. You know that?" The Rolls Royce arrived at 10:30. It was a phantom, sleek and black, with leather seats and polished chrome. The driver, a man in his 50s named Robert, opened the door for Karen with a bow. "Madame, your chariot awaits." Karen laughed despite her nerves. David helped the boys into the car, making sure they were all buckled in safely. He kissed Karen one more time. "Go show them who you are." Karen nodded, her heart pounding. "I will." The drive to the Sentinel Hotel took 20 minutes. Karen spent the entire time taking deep breaths, calming her racing mind. The boys chatted excitedly in the back seat, pointing out cars and buildings they recognized. Benjamin kept asking where they were going. Karen just smiled and said, "Somewhere very special." When they pulled up to the hotel, Karen saw the red carpet stretching from the curb to the entrance. Photographers were stationed along the sides, snapping pictures of arriving guests. Women in expensive dresses and men in tailored suits stepped out of BMWs and Mercedes, smiling for the cameras. Karen's stomach tightened. This was it. There was no turning back now. Robert came around and opened her door. Karen stepped out slowly, her green dress catching the sunlight. The photographers immediately turned their cameras toward her. She could hear the clicks, see the flashes. Then Robert opened the other doors, and the boys stepped out one by one. Benjamin first, standing tall and proud. Christopher next, looking around nervously. Daniel third, grinning at the cameras. And finally Ethan, holding Robert's hand as he climbed out carefully. The four of them lined up beside their mother, each one reaching for her hand. The photographers went wild. Cameras flashed non-stop. People on the red carpet stopped and stared. Karen heard whispers, gasps, saw people pulling out their phones to take pictures. She didn't look at any of them. She just held her son's hands and walked slowly, confidently, toward the entrance. Inside the ballroom, the wedding was in full swing. Guests were mingling, sipping champagne, admiring the elaborate floral arrangements. The room was massive, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, tall white columns lining the walls, and a long aisle down the center covered in rose petals. At the front, near the altar, Michael stood talking to his best man. He was wearing a custom tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, his face relaxed and happy. He had no idea what was about to happen. Karen walked through the doors, and the room fell silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every head turned. Michael looked up, and the color drained from his face. Karen walked slowly down the aisle, her sons beside her, their little hands gripping hers tightly. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting to spread like wildfire. "Is that his ex-wife? Are those her kids? She has quadruplets? I thought she couldn't have children." Karen reached the front row, the seat Michael had reserved for her, and sat down gracefully. The boys climbed up beside her, sitting quietly, looking around with wide eyes. One of them, Daniel, waved at Michael. "Hi." Michael stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, his eyes locked on Karen. His best man, a man named Ryan, leaned over and whispered something, but Michael didn't respond. He just stared. Ashley appeared at the top of the staircase, ready to make her grand entrance. She was wearing a white gown that looked like it cost more than most people's cars, with a long train and a veil that sparkled under the lights. The music started, signaling her entrance, but no one was looking at her. Everyone was still staring at Karen and the four little boys sitting beside her. Ashley started walking down the aisle, her smile faltering as she realized no one was paying attention. When she reached the front and saw what everyone was looking at, she stopped in her tracks. Michael's mother, Susan, was sitting a few rows behind Karen. She leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Karen, what are you doing here?" Karen turned slightly, her expression calm. "I was invited. Michael wanted me in the front row, so here I am." Susan's eyes dropped to the boys, and her face went pale. Are those your children?" Karen nodded. "Yes, these are my sons, Benjamin, Christopher, Daniel, and Ethan." The whispers grew louder. Susan looked at Michael, her voice rising. "Michael, what is going on? You told me she was barren." Michael finally found his voice. I didn't..." But he couldn't finish the sentence. Ashley grabbed his arm, her voice low but furious. "Who is that woman?" Michael didn't answer. Ashley's voice grew louder. "Michael, who is that woman, and why does she have 4 children?" Karen stood up slowly, drawing everyone's attention. She looked at Michael, her voice steady. "You called me barren, Michael. You told me I was the reason we couldn't have children. You blamed me. You humiliated me. You threw me away." The room was completely silent. But I wasn't the problem. I was never the problem. "And these 4 boys are proof of that?" Susan's voice cracked. "Michael, is this true? Did you lie?" Michael's face turned red. "I didn't lie. I thought..." Karen cut him off. "You thought it was easier to blame me than to face the truth. You refused to get tested. You refused to admit that the problem might be yours. And you destroyed our marriage because of your pride." Ashley stepped back, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "You told me she couldn't have kids. You told me that's why you left her." Michael turned to Ashley, desperation in his eyes. "I thought that was the truth. I didn't know." Ashley shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You lied to me. You lied to her. You lied to everyone." She dropped her bouquet on the floor and walked off the stage, heading toward the exit. Her bridesmaids rushed after her. Michael tried to follow, but Ryan grabbed his arm. "Dude, let her go. This is done." Michael turned back to the crowd, to the hundreds of guests staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. He looked at Karen, his voice breaking. "Karen, I didn't mean..." But Karen just shook her head. "Yes, you did. You meant every word. And now, everyone knows the truth." She gathered her boys, took their hands, and walked back down the aisle. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. As she reached the doors, she paused and looked back one last time. Michael stood alone at the altar, his perfect wedding in ruins, his lies exposed for the world to see. Karen didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel satisfaction. She just felt free. Outside, Robert was waiting with the car. He opened the door, and Karen helped the boys inside. As they drove away from the hotel, Benjamin asked, "Mommy, why was everyone looking at us?" Karen smiled, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Because you're special, baby. All of you are so special." The boys chattered excitedly the whole drive home, talking about the big room and the pretty flowers and the fancy clothes everyone was wearing. Karen listened to their voices, felt their warmth beside her, and realized that this moment right here was her revenge. Not the spectacle at the wedding, not the public humiliation of Michael, but this, the life she had built, the family she had created, the proof that she had survived and thrived despite everything he had done to break her. When they got home, David was waiting on the front porch. He helped the boys out of the car and scooped up 2 of them, making them giggle. Karen walked up the steps and into his arms. "How did it go?" he asked. Karen smiled. "It went exactly the way it needed to." They went inside, and Karen changed out of her dress into comfortable clothes. Linda came over an hour later with pizza, and they all sat in the living room, eating and laughing while the boys played with their toys. Karen's phone had been buzzing non-stop since she left the wedding. Text messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Voicemails from reporters wanting interviews. Emails from bloggers asking for comments. But Karen ignored all of it. She wasn't interested in making this a media circus. She had said what she needed to say, and now she was done. The story spread anyway. By that evening, videos of Karen's entrance were all over social media. Someone had filmed her walking down the aisle with the boys, and the clip had gone viral. The comment section was flooded with support. "She's a queen." "Good for her." Michael got exactly what he deserved. There were also negative comments, people calling Karen petty or vindictive, but Karen didn't read those. She didn't need the validation of strangers. She had her family, her friends, and her peace. That was enough. A week later, Karen received a letter in the mail. There was no return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Michael. She sat down at the kitchen table and opened it slowly. The letter was short, handwritten on plain white paper. "Karen, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I spent 7 years blaming you for something that was my fault. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too proud to face the truth. Seeing you at the wedding, seeing your children, seeing the life you built without me, it broke something in me. I realize now that I lost more than a wife. I lost a woman who loved me when I didn't deserve it, who stood by me when I gave her every reason to leave, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I'm sorry, Karen. I'm so sorry. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours. You deserve peace. You always did. Michael?" Karen read the letter 3 times. She felt the old anger rise up, the bitterness, the hurt. But underneath all of that, she felt something else. Pity. Michael had spent 7 years running from the truth, and now he had to live with the consequences. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The chapter of her life that included Michael was over, and she had no intention of reopening it. 6 months after the wedding, Karen opened a boutique in downtown Portland. It was a small shop specializing in children's clothing, handmade toys, and parenting books. She called it 4 Blessings. a name that made her smile every time she said it. The shop did well, not just because of the viral story, but because Karen had a genuine passion for what she did. She loved helping parents find the perfect outfit for their child's first birthday, or recommending books that would help them navigate the challenges of raising toddlers. Linda helped her run the business, managing the finances while Karen handled the creative side. The boys would come to the shop after preschool, playing in the back room, while Karen helped customers. It was chaotic and exhausting, and absolutely perfect. David continued teaching, and his students adored him. He would come home with stories about the kids in his class, about the funny questions they asked, and the creative projects they completed. He coached the school's basketball team and volunteered at a youth center on weekends. Karen would watch him with the boys, teaching them how to ride bikes, how to throw a baseball, how to tie their shoes, and she would feel overwhelmed with gratitude. This man, who had every reason to be bitter about his own struggles, chose instead to pour love into every part of his life. He was the kind of father Karen had always dreamed her children would have. The boys grew quickly. By the time they were 5, they were starting kindergarten, each one developing their own interests and personalities even more distinctly. Benjamin loved building things, spending hours with Legos and blocks. Christopher loved books, reading far above his grade level. Daniel loved sports, always running, jumping, climbing. Ethan loved music, humming tunes constantly and asking for piano lessons. Karen enrolled them in different activities, trying to nurture each one's individual passions while also keeping them connected as a unit. It wasn't always easy. There were fights and tears and moments of pure chaos, but there was also laughter and love and a sense of belonging that filled their home. One evening, about 7 years after the wedding incident, Karen was tucking the boys into bed when Benjamin asked a question that caught her off guard. "Mommy, why don't we have a grandpa on your side?" Karen paused, sitting on the edge of his bed. "You do have a grandpa. Grandpa Joe, remember? He lives in Eugene with Grandma." Benjamin shook his head. "No, I mean a grandpa who was married to you before Daddy." Karen's heart tightened. She had known this question would come eventually, but she hadn't prepared herself for it. "I was married to someone else before Daddy, yes. But it didn't work out, and that's okay, because it brought me to Daddy and to you boys." Christopher, from the other side of the room, piped up. "Did that man not want us?" Karen felt tears prick her eyes. She walked over to Christopher's bed and sat down beside him. "He didn't know about you, and honestly, baby, it doesn't matter, because the man who matters, the man who is your real daddy, is downstairs right now, probably eating ice cream straight from the carton." That made all 4 boys giggle. Daniel sat up. "Does that mean we can have ice cream too?" Karen laughed. "Nice try, but no, it's bedtime." After tucking them in and kissing each one goodnight, Karen went downstairs and found David doing exactly what she had said, standing in the kitchen with a spoon in the ice cream container. "I saw that," she said, crossing her arms. David grinned. "Saw what?" She walked over and took the spoon from him, taking a bite herself. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, passing the spoon back and forth, and Karen felt a wave of contentment wash over her. This was her life. This was her family. This was everything she had fought for. Everything she had been told she would never have. Michael's name came up occasionally over the years, usually through mutual acquaintances who felt the need to update Karen on his life. She learned that he and Ashley never got back together after the wedding. Ashley had moved to Seattle and married someone else. Michael had stayed in Portland, but his reputation had taken a serious hit. His architectural firm had lost several major clients, and he had struggled to rebuild his professional standing. He had dated a few women over the years, but nothing serious. According to the rumors, he had become somewhat of a recluse, avoiding social events and keeping to himself. Karen felt no satisfaction in hearing about his struggles. She had moved on completely, and his life no longer held any relevance to hers. One afternoon, about 10 years after the divorce, Karen was at the boutique rearranging a display when the door chimed. She looked up and froze. Michael stood in the doorway. He looked older, grayer, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, nothing like the tailored suits he used to wear. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Michael cleared his throat. "Hi, Karen." Karen set down the stuffed animal she was holding. "Michael, what are you doing here?" He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to see your shop. I've heard good things about it." Karen nodded slowly. Thank you. Another silence. Michael looked around at the colorful displays, the racks of tiny clothes, the shelves of toys. It's really nice. You've done well for yourself. Karen crossed her arms. Was there something specific you needed, Michael? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I wanted to say, in person, that I'm sorry for everything. I know I said it in the letter, but I needed you to hear it from me. I was wrong, Karen, about everything, and I've spent the last 10 years living with that. Karen studied him carefully. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the regret etched into his face, but she also felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, no lingering pain, just indifference. I appreciate you saying that, she said quietly. But Michael, I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, but for me. I needed to let go of what you did so I could move forward. Michael nodded, his eyes glistening. You have a beautiful family. Your boys, they're lucky to have you. Karen smiled softly. I'm lucky to have them. Michael took a step toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you're happy. Karen looked at him, this man who had once been her entire world and felt nothing but peace. I am, Michael. I really am. He nodded one last time and walked out of the shop. Karen watched him go, then turned back to her display. A customer walked in a moment later, asking about baby blankets, and Karen shifted seamlessly into her role, helping the woman find the perfect gift for her newborn granddaughter. By the time the customer left, Karen had completely forgotten about Michael's visit. He was part of her past, and her past no longer had power over her present. That evening, Karen sat on the back porch with David, watching the boys play soccer in the yard. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. David reached over and took her hand. You okay? Karen nodded. More than okay. He squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you, you know, for everything you've overcome, for the woman you've become. Karen leaned her head on his shoulder. I couldn't have done it without you. They sat there in comfortable silence, listening to the boys laugh and shout, and Karen realized that this moment, right here, was the culmination of every hard choice she had ever made, every tear she had cried, every night she had spent believing she would never be happy again. It had all led her here, to this porch, with this man, watching these children, and it was worth it. Every single second of pain had been worth it. The boys are teenagers now, each one carving out their own path in the world. Benjamin is captain of his high school robotics team, building machines that amaze even his teachers. Christopher is editor of the school newspaper, writing articles that have been picked up by local news outlets. Daniel is the star player on the varsity soccer team, with scouts from colleges already reaching out. Ethan is a gifted pianist, performing in competitions and winning awards. Karen watches them grow with a mixture of pride and disbelief. These boys, who weren't supposed to exist, who were born from a love that wasn't supposed to be possible, are thriving. They are kind, intelligent, hard-working young men who treat people with respect and pursue their passions with dedication. They are everything Karen could have hoped for, and more. David and Karen celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary last year. They renewed their vows in the same backyard where they got married, surrounded by their boys, Linda, Karen's parents, and a small group of close friends. It was simple and beautiful, just like their relationship. That night, after everyone had gone home and the boys were asleep upstairs, Karen and David sat on the porch once again. Do you ever think about how different your life could have been? David asked. Karen thought about it, about the woman she was 10 years ago, broken and lost and believing she was worthless, about the journey she had taken to get here, about the strength she had found in the darkest moments. I think about it sometimes, she admitted. But then I look at what I have now, and I realize that everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. David smiled. Even the hard parts? Karen nodded. Especially the hard parts, because without them, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have you. I wouldn't have our boys. I wouldn't know how strong I really am. She looked up at the stars, scattered across the night sky like tiny diamonds. Michael broke me in a lot of ways, but breaking is sometimes the only way to rebuild into something stronger. Karen's boutique expanded into a second location last year. She hired a staff of 5, including 2 young mothers who reminded her of herself years ago. tired, overwhelmed, but determined to create a better life for their children. She mentored them, taught them about business, encouraged them when they doubted themselves. She paid them more than minimum wage and offered flexible hours so they could be there for their kids. Linda teased her about being too generous, but Karen didn't care. She remembered what it felt like to be at rock bottom with no one to help her up. She would never let another woman feel that way if she could help it. The boys ask about Michael occasionally, usually in passing. Karen answers their questions honestly but briefly. She doesn't paint him as a villain, but she doesn't sugarcoat the truth either. She tells them that sometimes people make mistakes, that pride can blind you to what really matters, that it's important to own your faults instead of blaming others. The boys seem to understand. They've grown up in a home filled with honesty, accountability, and unconditional love. They know what a healthy relationship looks like because they see it every day between their parents. One evening, Benjamin asked a question that caught Karen off guard. "Mom, do you think we'll ever meet him?" "Michael?" Karen paused in the middle of chopping vegetables for dinner. "I don't know, honey. Would you want to?" Benjamin shrugged. "Not really. I'm just curious. Like, he's technically the reason you met Dad, right? If he hadn't been such a jerk, you might still be married to him." Karen laughed despite herself. "That's one way to look at it." Christopher, who was doing homework at the table, looked up. "I think it's good we don't know him. Dad is our dad. That's all that matters." The other boys murmured in agreement. Karen felt her throat tighten with emotion. These boys, who had every right to be curious about the man who came before their father, had no interest in him, because David had filled that role so completely, so perfectly, that there was no void left to fill. That night, after dinner, Karen told David about the conversation. He smiled and kissed her forehead. "They're right, you know. I am their dad. Biology doesn't change that." Karen hugged him tightly. "You're the best man I've ever known." David chuckled. Well, the bar wasn't set very high. As Karen approaches 50, she looks back on her life with a sense of gratitude that still surprises her. There were years when she didn't think she would survive the pain, when she believed the lie that she was broken and unworthy. But she did survive. She rebuilt herself from the ground up, piece by piece, until she became someone she was proud to be. She learned that healing doesn't happen overnight. That strength comes from getting back up after being knocked down. That sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. She learned that family isn't always the one you're born into, but the one you choose and build with love and intention. Karen still thinks about that day at the wedding sometimes, not with bitterness or regret, but with a quiet sense of closure. She doesn't regret going. She doesn't regret bringing her boys, because that moment wasn't about Michael. It was about her. It was about standing up for the woman she used to be and showing the world that she had survived, that she had thrived, that she had won, not by destroying him, but by refusing to let him destroy her. The wedding was just a moment, a blip in the timeline of her life. But the life she built afterward, that's the real story. That's the part that matters. If you've made it this far, we'd love to hear from you one last time. What would you have done in Karen's situation? Would you have gone to the wedding? Would you have walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of your own strength or the strength of someone you know, please share it. You never know who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are never as broken as someone tries to make you believe. Your story isn't over, not by a long shot. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more powerful stories every week. See you in the next one.